Uh, Guten Nacht. Yeah. Well, it is nice to see all of you. I did not know that my living room could accommodate so many people. Yeah, allow me to put this down. Yeah, I see that my housekeeper, Herta, has left me a little cup of tea. I gave her the evening off so that she could visit a friend. Ordinarily, I would have a little bit of lemon pound cake for everybody, but I'm afraid that because she is not here, I cannot offer you anything but my presence. So, yeah, oftentimes people will come here, students and visitors to Princeton, they wish to meet with me and to ask me questions about my life. Yeah, so perhaps we will reverse things. I will ask you the questions and you will provide the answers. Is that acceptable? Yeah, well, I was walking home from the institute and I happened to stop at a friend, a little neighbor's house with the girl. Her name is Adelaide, and I have been giving her lessons in mathematics. And today she wanted to give me a little present for the help that I have given her. And I have it here. So, yeah. Well, here it is, a yo-yo. And I am hoping to master the physics of the yo-yo because my son, Hans Albert, will be visiting me with his daughter. And I wanted to show him how competent I am. Now I will show you. You see what I have learned? Oh, I think there is a name for that kind of movement where it just spins at the bottom, but I don't know what it is called. Perhaps you know? Yeah, it is sleeping. Well, I hope none of you are sleeping tonight. Yeah, so I will leave that there. Let me take off my coat. Yeah. One of the questions that people, when they come here to meet with me, that they are curious about is, well, they will say, Professor Einstein, what makes you such a big shot? Why do the people in the world, they know your name and they want to meet with you? Well, would you like me to tell you why I think I am such a big shot? Yes. I don't have to if you don't want me to. Yeah, so, well, it has to do with, one of my scientific discoveries that perhaps you already know the answer to this question. It is the theory of, the general theory of relativity as opposed to the special relativity. And perhaps we could start there. Would you like me to tell you how it was that I come to the theory of general relativity? Yes. You are sure? Yes. Well, all right. Well, can you already tell me what is special relativity? It has to do with time and space. Yeah, and it was my old professor of physics that he put the two together after he read my paper. And he said, well, from this day forth, we cannot separate time and space. They are one reality. Of course, we only experience this reality at incredibly fast speeds, like close to the speed of light. Well, anyways, for, I don't know, 10 years, perhaps, I was trying to expand the theory of relativity to incorporate gravity. What is gravity? Newton thought that gravity is an instantaneous attraction between bodies. It is what explains why the apple will fall from the tree, why the moon is going around the earth, why the earth is circulating the sun. That was what was gravity for him, instantaneous attraction between one body and another through the vacuum of space. But otherwise, he did not know what is gravity. All he understood was it was instantaneous attraction. Is this possible? Well, I ask you, What if the absolute limit of speed is the speed of light? You see, well, what is the speed of light? We say 186,000 miles per second. So 1 second, a beam of light can go around the Earth and about 7.5 times. That's very fast, but it is not instantaneous. So I begin to question Isaac Newton. It cannot be instantaneous. There must be some kind of communication between one body and the other. But what is it? You see, and my colleague said to me, well, Albert, you must not question Newton. He is like a god. It will ruin your career. Nobody will respect you if you question Newton. Well, I wasn't going to let that stop me. No. I was a knight of reason. I wanted to understand what is the reality of things. And that required a great deal of work. I recall, well, I will show you. In 1907, I was working as a third-class patent expert in the city of Bern, Switzerland. I had already made some important achievements. In the year 1905, I was married to Mileva marriage. We had 2 little boys, Hans Albert and Edward. And I had opportunities to go elsewhere, but the salary that I was receiving at the patent office, it allowed me to have a very comfortable life with my wife and children. So, and the work, it was all right. So one time I am sitting in the office, I think it was during when we had the lunch, and nobody was there, and I am sitting there by myself, and I don't know why it is, but what was that? All of a sudden, an image, it came into my mind. What I pictured was somebody falling off the roof of a house, yeah? And it occurred to me that this person would not experience his own weight. He would be weightless. That is what I imagined. And, well, I spent many years trying to understand, well, what is going on? Why is he weightless? I recall that Galileo, the great scientist from Italy, he was the one who said that objects of different weights, they will fall at the same rate in a perfect vacuum. Yeah, are you with me? Yeah. You see, it does not matter if one is very heavy and the other one is very light. In a vacuum, they will fall at the same rate. But then I begin to think about this. The problem of acceleration. Perhaps there is a relationship between what we call gravity and what we call acceleration. So I recall that I think it was 1913, Mileva and the boys and myself, we are taking a little holiday with the Curies, Madame Curie and her husband Pierre and their children. We are in the Alps. We're having a nice afternoon walking, but I am not paying any attention to the beautiful sky and the snow and the mountain peaks. All of a sudden, I grab a hold of Madame Curie's arms and I said to her, what I need to understand is what happens to passengers inside an elevator if the cable snaps and the elevator falls. She said, Albert, you're crazy. Why can't you just stop for a while and enjoy the beautiful afternoon and the scenery? But I was obsessed to try to understand what would happen inside the elevator. If Galileo is correct, then everything inside the elevator will be falling at the same rate. So, if I am in the elevator and I have an apple that I borrowed from Isaac Newton, yeah, and somebody snapped the cable and the elevator is falling and I drop the apple, what will happen to the apple? Will it fall to the floor? No, it will be in free fall, just like myself. And if I take some coins from my pocket and I drop them, they will not fall to the floor. They will be in free fall too. I recall I was telling this to one of my classes, and a student said, Professor Einstein, if I am in the elevator when it is falling and I don't want to die, so at the last moment I will jump up. Is that possible? No. It assumes that her feet would be on the floor of the elevator. But no, she would be in free fall, along with everything else, the other passengers, so she could not jump up. Well, then another image came into my mind. What if I could find a rocket? I light the rocket, and I put the rocket under the floor of the elevator, yeah? So now the rocket is pushing up against the floor of the elevator at a certain rate, of course. What will happen to the people inside? What will happen to their feet? It will be back on the floor of the elevator. And the apple, it will be on the floor too. You see? And the people inside the elevator, they will not know if they are in a gravitational field or if they are accelerating upward. And the same thing is true if we put this imaginary elevator, we put it up into space. Now there are no windows in the elevator, and it is in free fall until along comes Professor Einstein with the magic rocket, and it goes up, accelerates against the floor of the elevator. Again, the people don't know. Are they on Earth or are they in outer space? So what do I conclude from this? You cannot tell the difference between gravity and acceleration. They are one and the same thing. In fact, what I called it equivalence. They are equivalent one to the other. I have two. We have one. Gravity and acceleration, they are the same. Newton was wrong. Yeah, I said that. Yeah, it is true. Yeah, he was wrong. There is no instantaneous attraction between the moon and the earth. It has to do with the equivalence of acceleration. And again, but the question is, why doesn't the moon plunge into the earth? Well, I had to complete a new study of mathematics. We call it, I can't remember, perhaps you can, tensor calculus, yeah? It had to do with the curvature of spaces, yeah? Well, I thought if it is not instantaneous force that is responsible for what we call gravity, perhaps it has to do with the structure, the architecture of space itself. But when we talk about space, we cannot leave out something else. Time, yeah. They are one and the same. Time and space. Of course, at increasingly very fast speeds, close to the speed of light. Yeah, so it took me many years to work out the mathematical foundations of this. And of course, at the same time, I am in a race with another physicist, a mathematician by the name of David Hilbert, and he is racing me to the complete equations. Meanwhile, if my theory is correct, and I imagine that all bodies, no matter how small they are, they will cause a certain indentation in the fabric of space and time. It can be a subatomic particle, it can be a galaxy, a sun. If you can imagine space-time like a fabric. Can you picture that? Yeah, very simple, yeah? Now, it is very flat. But if we put a heavy object in the middle of this flat surface, what will happen to it? It will cause an indentation. Yeah, can you picture the indentation? Yeah? Well, along comes a little planet by the name of Einstein. Everything wants to travel in a straight line, a uniform direction, yeah, including all the planets. That's what they want to do. So here comes Professor Einstein, the planet, and there is an indentation in the fabric of space-time caused by a massive object like the sun. And here is that sloping in space-time. Well, I want to plunge down towards the star, but because of my force that I am traveling in, I don't. You see, the two forces, they are in balance. The force of my own travel and the sloping of space-time, what we call a gravitational field, yeah? So instead, I am still traveling in a straight line, but look what it appears to be. In the curvature of space-time, that is an orbit. You see? That is what gravity is. And very succinctly, I can say that objects in space-time cause space-time to warp, to create indentations. And these indentations, these warps will tell objects how they will move. In the case of the Earth, the indentation around the sun will cause all the planets to move in a circular formation. Are you with me? That is what gravity is, yeah? And because energy is equivalent to mass, then the effects of gravity must also influence a beam of light. Light is a form of energy, and the curvature of space-time, it will affect light as well as other forms of matter and energy. So I am predicting now, it's 1912, 1913, that a beam of light from a distant star, as it approaches our own little sun, what will happen to it? It will bend. It must bend because of the curvature around the sun. So I worked out how much this beam of light will bend. I was wrong. Fortunately, I realized this in time to make the right corrections. Also, something happened in 1914. What? Yeah. The war, yeah. There was a German industrialist very interested in testing my theory. He was going to, in fact, he did. He arranged for there to be an expedition to Crimea to test my theory during an eclipse, 1914. So they went to Crimea, waiting for the eclipse, but the war happened, and the Russians, they arrested the people, the Germans, accused them of being spies, and so their expedition was called off. Fortunately, there was a trade later on, and the Germans came back to Germany. So we had to wait for the next eclipse, which was in 1919, when the war was over. So in 1919, my theories on the general relativity fell into the hands of Sir Arthur Eddington. He was astronomer in what country? I cannot remember. Great Britain. Now, the British people, they wanted to oppose Germany, of course. It was the war. Why do they want to? What interest could they possibly have with a German physicist named Einstein? And he was a Jew on top of it. But Sir Arthur Eddington, he was a real scientist, interested in the truth. And he saw the values of my work, and he wanted to launch his own expedition. He got support from the government. When the war was over, he took 2 ships, one off the coast of West Africa, one to Brazil, in case the weather was not good in one place. Perhaps in the other place it would be good. So they make the photographs during the eclipse, because now with the solar eclipse, the sun is in shadow, yeah? So now they can take photographs of light from a distant star in the constellation Taurus. It took them, I don't know, 6 months to measure the results. One of my students said, Professor Einstein, what if it turns out you are wrong? I said, well, I feel very sorry for God. Because the theory is correct. I knew this, but I was right. They measure, and in November of that year, when all these scientists get together in London, and I wrote this down, I will share with you what they said. The chairman of these scientific societies, he stood up And he said to the assembled scientists, this is the most important result obtained in conjunction with the theory of gravity since Newton's day. And one of the highest achievements of human thought. And then the next day, the whole world was aware of what happened. And in the New York Times, the headline, "Lights askew in the heavens, Einstein theory triumphs." Einstein said light would bend as it passed through space-time near the sun. The scientists measured, and the light bent. Overnight, the unknown 40-year-old, shaggy-headed German-Swiss Jewish physicist became a world celebrity. Yeah, and science has been transformed. And I became a big shot. Well, you know, so that is the beginning of my the word celebrity. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that because now when I am living in Berlin, and when people are aware of the discoveries, well, they are treating me like I am some kind of a god. They will come to the apartment, they wait outside on the street to catch me. They want to write my autograph. They want to share their conceptions of the origin of the world and the universe. One man, he want to wash my feet. Yeah, it was crazy. Sometimes I would have to sneak out of the back of the building. That was the negative aspect of the celebrity. Of course, the money was pretty good now. I am living, well, I forget to tell you, my first wife, Mileva, and I, we are having a very difficult time. And I was offered a position at the University of Berlin in 1914. And so two friends, colleagues, Walter Nernst and Max Planck, they came to Zurich, where I am living with my family. And they said, well, you know, we have a position for you. You don't have to teach. You can pursue your studies. But I wasn't certain I wanted to go to Berlin. I renounced my German citizenship. I was a Swiss citizen now. I wanted nothing to do with Germany, and mainly because of the militarism of the country. So I told them, why don't you go for a little train ride, and tomorrow I will meet you on the train platform. If I am holding a white rose, then my answer is no. If I have a red rose, the answer is yes. So they took a little trolley ride, and the next morning I met them on the station, and what color rose am I holding? A red rose. I accept the position, and I went to Berlin. I left my wife, Mileva, in Zurich. She did not want to move to Berlin with the boys, and it was there in Berlin that I began to see much more of my cousin, Elsa. She was my first cousin, Elsa Lowenstein, and well, we began to have a, well, I might say a romantic relationship. And when my wife, Mileva, came to visit me in Berlin, she understood what is happening between me and Elsa. And I was thinking that it was time for us to have to separate. But she insisted that we remain together for the sake of the children. So I wrote up a list of conditions. And I am not proud of those conditions. Do you want to know what they were? Yeah. Well, I said to Mileva, if you can abide by these conditions, then we will live together in Berlin with the boys. Here is number one. You must serve me my meals every day, 3 days, 3 times a day at the same time. You must keep my bedroom and my study immaculate. If I ask you to leave the room, you must leave without any question. You must not expect any kind of intimacy with me, social or otherwise, and you must not say anything bad about me to the children. So she accepted these conditions. They were very difficult for her, and after 3 months, she had enough. She took the children back to Zurich. And I still recall that morning on the train platform when I saw her get on the train with Hans Albert and Edward. It was one of the saddest days of my life. I didn't think I would ever see them again. I suspected that she would turn the children against me. And I believe that I spent most of the afternoon alone in my own apartment crying. So I begin my work at the University of Berlin. I am working on the theory of general relativity, and sometimes I forget to eat. And the war is going on. I am losing weight. I lost 56 pounds during the period of the war. Yeah, and Elsa started to take care of me. She would make food for me, and so I moved into a room that was opposite her, and I kept asking Maleva that could we please have a divorce. I promised to give her all the money if I win the Nobel Prize. And I was sure that I was going to win it. I would give her this so she could take care of her children, our children, and herself for many years. And finally she agreed to this, and we get a divorce. And I think it was in Switzerland. We went to the court for the divorce, when the judge said, Professor Einstein, you are not allowed to marry anybody else for a certain length of time. Well, that was Switzerland. I went back to Berlin and I got married to Elsa. And I adopted her two daughters, Margot and Elsa, and we began to set up housekeeping. Elsa was a very different woman. She was very motherly, she was very outgoing, and she had no interest in science whatsoever, except she was interested in me. And she loved to take care of me. And so we had a good marriage. And so after the war, of course, it became clear that my life would be completely different now. In 1921, I am still living in Berlin with Elsa, and a colleague came to the apartment. He said, Albert, Chaim Weizmann, he is the president of the World Zionist Organization. He would like you to accompany him to America to go on a little fundraising for the Hebrew University in Israel. Well, it was not Israel yet, it was Jerusalem. And I didn't want to go. I had my own work to do. I was not interested in the United States, so I said no. But he read the telegram again from Weizmann, and I realized, well, I have a certain obligation to my own people. I was a Jew, but I didn't identify with the religious components of Judaism, only with the fact that it had a long tradition. And I was proud to be a Jew, so I accept. 1921, myself and Elsa and Chaim Weizmann and some other dignitaries, part of the World Zionist Organization, we took a boat across the Atlantic. Took 2 weeks. We went to New York City, and before we even come off the ship, the reporters are on board, and the lights, their cameras are flashing. They want to take my picture, and somebody asked me, "What is your occupation, Professor Einstein?" I said, "I am a fashion model." I will tell you eventually. My dear wife Elsa saw there was an economic opportunity, began to charge people to take my photographs, and if she would give the money to charities for children. Yeah, but that was later on. Now I was not speaking English. I had to rely upon a translator. So we get off, we walk down the gangplank, and we get into an open roof. There's a car with no roof. And now I understand what it means to be a big shot, because the streets of Manhattan, they are lined on every side with people, and they are holding banners, and they are cheering, and they are calling my name. And I am riding in the car, and I am waving, you know, a big smile on my face. Yeah, we go to the hotel, the Waldorf Astoria. I meet the mayor. He gives me the key to the city. And so this is what it means to be a big shot. Yeah, I was not completely comfortable with this. We make a series of lectures. We went as far west as Chicago, and then we went to Boston and Hartford. And the whole purpose was to raise money to establish a university, Hebrew University in Jerusalem. But we didn't make enough money, just enough to start some medical facilities in Jerusalem. So it was a little disappointment for Chaim Weizmann. Nevertheless, I had my first introduction to this country. And then we went back to Germany. Now, it was 1921, and there are many changes afoot in my own country, Germany. As you know, after the war, the monarchy fell, and there was a democratic government, the Weimar Republic, well, an attempt at democracy, and because of the terms of the treaty that ended the war, the Versailles Treaty, the times were very difficult for the German people. And I don't think that any German people supported the terms of the treaty. Everybody was against it because of the penalties that was imposed upon the German people. So there was a lot of suffering in Germany. There was massive unemployment. There was hunger. Yeah, and so the people were very, very angry, very disturbed. And this was very fertile ground for the rise of the German Workers' National Party, otherwise known as the Nazis. Yeah? And they wanted to expel all the Jews from German life. This was their platform, one of the tenets, you see. So I understood even then, so early, that we were in for a very difficult time in this country, in Germany. Fortunately, I received invitations to other countries to go and lecture on the theories of gravity and relativity. And it was an opportunity for me and Elsa to travel, to see the world, to inform others of my own work, but also to provide a world public with another conception of Germany. It wasn't just martial militarism, it was also the land of Schiller and Schubert and Mozart and Goethe. And this was the impression I wanted to leave with people. And to some extent, I believe I was successful. And another purpose in going abroad to other countries and was to rebuild the bridges that were broken by the war, the First World War. You know, before the war, there was ability for people, scientists and artists, to collaborate. It didn't matter if you were German or French or English or what. If you were pursuing truth and beauty, that was all that mattered. But those connections, those collaborations, they was broken by the war. So I wanted in my own way to rebuild those bridges of understanding. So I, in my own naive way, I imagined that I was serving a purpose for the people of my own country, Germany. But every time that I returned and I would read certain newspapers, well, in the words, in the mind of some what we call right-wing extremists, I was perceived as a traitor. Yeah, particularly because of my pacifism. I was an outspoken pacifist. I wanted nothing to do with armies, with militarism, with any kind of innocence. I was against communism, not socialism so much. Yeah, I respected, I consider myself a socialist. But patriotism, I had no use for patriotism. I thought it was the basis of war in the world, that believed that your country is superior to some other country, and therefore it gives you the right to kill other people. Yeah, so no, I wanted nothing to do with that. Well, you see, there are certain people in Germany who could not accept those ideas, and so they wanted to impugn my character. There was cartoons that began to appear in the right-wing press in Germany, and one of them, I recall, it was of somebody, just if you can picture, a big boot kicking me down the stairs. Another one, the caption was, and it was a little cartoon character of me. The caption was, "Not hung yet." Eventually, when Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, I understand that he put me at the top of the list. Kidnapped or killed, didn't matter, wanted to get rid of me. So I was, but I have to tell you that this was in a context of what was happening throughout the country. There was rising anti-Semitism, as I'm sure you are aware of. The Jews were being blamed for all the problems in the country. And there was improvement in the life of the German people as the terms of the treaty were somewhat mellowed, and there began to flow loans into the country. So as you probably know, there was a time of great liberation in Germany, a certain sexual liberation. I don't care what you read about me in shady establishments. It wasn't true. Well, perhaps a little true. It was the times. I was yeah, so it was a very complex time in the history of Germany. And I knew that my life was in danger. And so as much time as I could leave Berlin with Elsa, I knew that I felt safe when I was in other countries. Before my 50th birthday in 1929, my friends got together and they bought me a boat. They knew that I loved to sail, and I called my boat Tummler, which is an old German word for dolphin. And we had a little villa outside of Berlin in the village of Kaputh. I don't remember how many miles from Berlin. And on the weekends, Elsa and I would go to Kaputh. We had our little lodge, and I could spend wonderful times walking in the woods, taking my boat on the river. And my housekeeper insisted that I wear a life preserver jacket. But I didn't want to. I don't know why. I just didn't want to have one. But what I enjoyed besides sailing is if I saw another boat on the river, I would aim my boat toward that boat. And as I approached it, I would wait until the skipper would get all flustered. And at the last moment, I would turn my boat away. One time I tipped the boat over, but I almost drowned because I wasn't wearing a life preserver. I still don't want to wear a life preserver. Now, we didn't have a telephone originally in our little villa in Kaputh, but our neighbor was a potter. So he agreed that whenever somebody wanted to speak to me or Elsa or my stepdaughter Margot, they would call the potter, and he would come down the hill to get us. But this was inconvenient for him. So Elsa, she was very creative. She gave him a little trumpet, and she taught him some different songs, some different notes. So when we heard one set of notes, we know the phone is for me. Another set is for Elsa. And that worked out very convenient. We don't have to have a telephone. Well, we only had the villa for a couple of summers, but because then what is all happening with the rise of Hitler. But I should tell you that part of the anti-Semitism was an anti-relativity. Can you believe that? Anti-science that was happening in Germany. Not just any science, but Jewish science. Yeah. There was a movement against Jewish scientists. And as a celebrity, I was receiving most of this anti-science bias. In early 20s, there was a big, do you want to hear this? Is this? Yeah, I think it is indicative of the times. There was, we called it the Berlin Philharmonic Hall in Berlin. Have you been to Berlin? Yeah, it will accommodate almost 2,000 people. There was a right-wing journalist by the name of Paul Weyland, and he despised me. He despised Jewish scientists. He wanted to prove that my science was bogus, that it had no basis in reality, in fact. In fact, those scientists who were against Jewish physicists argued that the Jewish scientists, they have no conception of reality. All of their ideas are abstract. But the true German Aryan scientists is imbued with the blood of the oil, of the earth, of the people. Jewish physicists, they cannot appreciate this. They do not relate to nature the same way that the Germans, the true German scientists will. So this was all part of the movement against me and other physicists and other scientists. I went to this event with my wife. Elsa and my daughter Margot, we sat there, and at first I thought it was ludicrous. I am listening to this man, Paul Whelan, inveigh against me and my discoveries. He even brought on stage some well-known scientists who were disputing my theories, calling them ridiculous and with no basis in truth. Well, then I begin to see there was danger, because the anti-science and the anti-Semitism, they were coming together. And when I left the hall, you know, there was a lobby, and on the table there was literature with the Nazi swastika on it. Yeah. So I could see the times that we are living in and how dangerous it was. I was invited to a debate between myself and Philipp Lenard. He was a physicist who had won the Nobel Prize. I think that he was jealous of my notoriety, of the fame that I had acquired, and he wanted to disparage me in public. So I went to this debate. I took part in this debate. It was outside of Berlin. Elsa came with me. She was so upset by the way they harangued me in public, she suffered a nervous breakdown. Yeah, it is true. Well, I am exaggerating somewhat, but she was very upset by this. And I was too. It took me quite a number of days to recover from what I experienced as a participant in this debate. So that is the temper of the times. In 1930, I was invited to go to University of California in Pasadena. I was invited to go there to spend perhaps 6 months at a time for 3 consecutive years. We went to New York, and then we went through the Panama Canal up to California, and when we get to San Diego, once again, there are thousands of people. They are waiting to greet me on the streets of San Diego. There was little children. They are holding hearts and flowers. They are throwing flowers at me. It was very wonderful. And I met Edwin Hubble, and you know, he was a very important person, and he maintains that the universe is expanding at a very rapid rate. The rate is increasing. Well, I was not completely sure that he was correct. You know, perhaps you have heard of the cosmological constant. I incorporated it into my own theory of gravity to account for the stasis of the universe. It is neither contracting nor expanding. But once I looked through the telescope on Mount Wilson and I looked at his calculations, I realized I was wrong. The universe is expanding. So I removed the cosmological constant from my equations. So I spent several months there, and then Elsa and I, we traveled. We have a little entourage. We went across the country. We stopped in the Grand Canyon. I meet some Hopi Native American people. They greet me as the great relative. Yeah, I think they was pulling my leg a little. We come back to New York, and I recall I went to I gave a little lecture in New York. I forget what the society invited me to lecture. And I said to all the people in the audience, you know, everybody was aware that Germany is rearming itself. And there is a great fear that will be another war, worse than the last one. So I tell the people, if only 2% of the young men refuse military service, it will be like throwing sand in the war machine. How can they possibly arrest so many people and still continue the war? Well, the next day, I look out on the streets of Manhattan, and the young men, they are wearing a little button that says 2%. Of course, in Germany, this was not going along very well. People were very upset that one of their own is suggesting that people not abide by the laws of the country, that they refuse military service. So if we go back, I go to the German consul in New York in 1931, I think, 1930, And the council said to me, you know, Professor Einstein, while you have been away, the Gestapo, they have gone, the German stormtroopers, they have gone into your apartment in Berlin, your little villa in Capuz, your office at the university. I said, what for? What are they looking for? They're looking for ammunition and weapons. They are accusing you of being a communist and a revolutionary working against the legitimate government of Germany. Well, you know, in 1933, Hitler was elected. He had 44% of the vote. He became the chancellor of Germany. Well, I realized that it was becoming increasingly dangerous for me to be in Germany. But nevertheless, we went back to Germany, and I am receiving offers from other universities, Oxford University, Princeton University. They want me to come and to be a professor, which means leaving Germany, leaving Berlin. I made one more trip to Pasadena, the University of California. Again, we come back to New York, and I wanted, when I am first, before that, I am in Berlin, and I want to go back to this country. So Elsa and I, we go to the American Embassy in Berlin to apply for the visa. And the consul person, he said, I'm sorry, Professor Einstein, but we cannot give you a visa. Why? Well, there is a certain patriotic women's organization, and they don't want you to be allowed to come into the country. Why? They are saying that you are a threat to established religion, you are a threat to science, you are going to undermine all the values by which we live, and you are a communist. So we can't give you the visa. I said, if I come back tomorrow and I don't get the visa, I will tell the whole world, and you will be a laughing stock. The next day, we come back, there are the visa. So we sail to America, we make one last trip there, and then that is where I find out that my home has been burglarized, broken into. All they find in Capuz is a bread knife. That is it. That is my weapon against the government. Now, what are we going to do? We can't go back there. It is too dangerous, so we go to Belgium. We spend 6 months on the Belgium coast trying to decide where are we going to go for the rest of the life. And we finally I accept to go to Princeton. Oh, I should tell you that the Belgian, the very hospitable people, they provided armed guards while Elsa and I and Margot, we are staying on the coast. And there was rumors that I would be assassinated. I am invited to go to Great Britain to lecture at, I think it was Oxford University. And my friends say, no, you must not go. There is a threat against your life. But I went anyways. You see, I survived. Yeah, there was 10,000 people there that I am speaking to, and I am warning about the rearmament of Germany. And when I am interviewed, I said to the reporter, if I was a Belgian citizen, of course, you know, Germany invaded Belgium, and I said to him, if I was a Belgian citizen, I would not hesitate to join the army and fight. Well, you cannot believe how this upset my pacifist friends. And also upset the German people and the German government. How can I please both? I remain a pacifist, but I felt that the threat to civilization was so great that only military force would prevent the Nazis under Hitler from destroying the freedoms that we enjoyed in Europe. So I was a convinced pacifist, but I felt that those were extraordinary circumstances. I made my decision that we would go to Princeton. We arrived in October of 1933. Eventually, I buy a little house right here on Mercer Street, and I begin to work at the Institute of Advanced Studies. It is only about a mile from where we are living. And what is my pursuit? Well, my focus is to combine the theory of the very big with the theories of the very small, to create a unified theory that would explain all the laws of physics. My colleagues think that I am crazy. And one of my friends and close colleagues, J. Oppenheimer, he called me to my face, cuckoo. They're incompatible, he said. You cannot integrate quantum mechanics with the theory of gravity. I said, well, I can. It will take me a long time, but I will try. That was the focus of my work as the institute. And at the same time, I could not close my eyes to the rest of the world. At first, when I come to Princeton, I feel very comfortable. There is a garden behind the house. It is a very quiet little town. I loved the structures, the architecture. But then I begin to pay more attention to the life outside of the university. When I went to the cinema with my wife, I noticed for the first time there is one section for the white people and another section for the colored people. And then I begin to open my eyes and to see what a segregated place Princeton is. Right in the university, there is no faculty of color. There are no students of color. I talked to the provost and I brought this to his attention, and he said, Professor, I completely agree with you. The moral thing to do would be to recruit more. But you know, so many of the students, they come from the South, and they would not be comfortable if there were other classmates of a different color. So you understand. Well, I don't understand at all. It was immoral. And on top of that, the same policy affected the people like myself. There was only one other Jew on the faculty, and he was fired. I believe because he was a Jew. Couldn't fire me because of my notoriety, yeah? Well, I had to address this problem. And when I am reading in the paper what is going on in the country, I realize that racism is prevalent in this society. Let us jump ahead a little bit. In 1946, at the end of the war, and these young men are coming back from overseas. These are soldiers. They have fought against fascism. They had fought for freedom and democracy, but when they come back here, they are treated still like second-class citizens. In the summer of 1946, over 50 young men are kidnapped and lynched just because of the color of their skin. I find this intolerable, and I feel I must do something to address this issue. Yeah, and you recall, I read in the New York Times an incident in Columbia, Tennessee, where a young serviceman just returned from overseas. He is walking with his mother down the street when a white repairman, radio repairman, pushes his mother on the ground for no reason. Well, the young serviceman, who is black, he pushes the repairman into a plate glass window. And that is the start of a terrible series of events that ended up with over 100 young black people being arrested, with the National Guard coming in with the machine guns and destroying all the black-owned businesses in the black part of Columbia, Tennessee. And 25 people eventually are put on trial. And fortunately, there was a powerful defense team headed up by a young, idealistic man by the name of Thurgood Marshall. And so now there was two trials, both of them in front of a white jury and a white judge, and the defense team succeeded in getting all but one man free. And that man only served a few months in prison. Well, in 1946, I was invited to the oldest black college in this country. It was outside, it was in Pennsylvania, Lincoln University, Lincoln College. There was a faculty, a small faculty, a student body of about 200, all young men. And I was invited to speak. Ordinarily, I refused to go to give the commencement address because it was so boring. They want to give me honors. I have to wear the city robe. But this occasion, because it was such a prestigious university, mainly because of its history and the fact that it was the oldest black college, I went. And I told the student body, as part of the commencement, that in my opinion, racism is a white man's disease. And I believe that. And I want to do whatever I could to eradicate this disease. When Marian Anderson came to Princeton, she was a great opera singer, black woman. She gave a concert right here in Princeton, and the critics loved her. But when she went to the Nassau Inn for a room that same night, they denied her a room because of the color of her skin. When I hear about that, I invited her to my house, where she stayed, much to the chagrin of my neighbors. Every time she came to Princeton to perform, she would stay with me. Also, I love to go to the concerts. I would go to 3 concerts a week. Yeah, sometimes I would bring my violin. I would play with the musicians. I went to a concert by Paul Robson. He was a great actor, performer, stage director, and a communist. I listened to his performance. Afterwards, I told him how much I enjoyed it. We had so much in common, we began to become close friends. 1947, when he was banned from performing, he was denied a passport. He could not leave the country. I had him come to my house for tea. Well, it doesn't sound like much, but in the context of the time when everybody is afraid of communism and the Red Scare, it was a bit of a revolutionary act. And we become close friends. You know, this was when there are so many lynchings going on in this country, not only in the South, but in other parts of the country. He wanted to persuade President Truman to pass a law that would prevent lynching. And he wanted to have a big demonstration in Washington, D.C. on the Mall, and I was invited to be one of the speakers at this occasion. But at the time, I had a great deal of pain on my stomach, and I was told that I had an aortic aneurysm. I could have perhaps have had it operated on, but I chose not to. So I had to decline from his invitation. Anyways, it was held. He had a meeting with the president, who said, no, I'm afraid that now is not the time to pass such a law. So the lynchings continued. In 1939, you know, sometimes people will talk to me about the Second World War, and they believe that I was responsible for the dropping of the atomic bomb. Well, that is a very painful subject for me. I had nothing to do with the development of the atomic bomb, although it was my formula. Energy is mass times the square of the speed of light. That was instrumental in setting all of this in motion. In 1939, my wife Elsa has passed away by now. She died of heart and kidney failure in 1936. I took a little vacation in the summer on Long Island, where I am visited by a refugee like myself, a Hungarian physicist, Leo Szilard, to tell me that the Germans are stopping shipments of uranium from Czechoslovakia, and that he had good intelligence that the Germans now know how to split uranium atoms by bombarding it with a stream of neutrons. Well, right away, I see the implications. A chain reaction would evolve so that it is possible to create a very powerful weapon through fission, through this chain reaction and the splitting of the atom. And what happens if the Germans master the technology before anyone else? Then we will be in a great danger. Leo and I, we sit down, we write a letter, and I signed the letter, and we send it. Well, eventually it finds its way to President Roosevelt. And I don't know if this was what really started it or not, but I like to think that it was an encouragement, an inducement to Roosevelt to begin to think about the United States committing its resources to develop the weapon, the atomic bomb, before the Germans. Never did I expect they would use this weapon. Never. I believed that if they had it, it would be a deterrent to the Germans. When I am told that, in fact, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, I was devastated. I had been to Japan. I had spent 6 weeks there. I respected the culture and the people. How they could drop this bomb on a civilian population and kill 70,000 people was beyond my comprehension. And then to do it a second time on another city. I pledged that I would do everything in my power to prevent this, to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. I served on many committees through my remaining years to work against nuclear armament. I'd also advocated for the peaceful use of atomic power. I would like to conclude. I was invited, because of this work, I was invited to speak at the UN General Assembly, and also on the occasion of the anniversary of the founding of the Nobel Prizes by, what is his name? Nobel. Yeah. It was, we went again to the Waldorf Astoria, and I will only read a little bit if you like to hear what I said on this occasion. It is very brief, but I think it sums up what is my view on many aspects of the post-war. Well, here it is. The picture, this is after the Second World War, the picture of our post-war world is not bright. As far as we, the physicists, are concerned, we are no politicians. But we know a few things that politicians do not know, and we feel the duty to speak up and to remind those responsible there is no escape into easy comforts, no distance ahead for proceeding little by little and delaying the necessary changes. There is no time left. The situation calls for a courageous effort for a radical change in our whole attitude. May the spirit that prompted Alfred Nobel to create his great institution, the spirit of trust and confidence, of generosity and brotherhood among men, prevail in the minds of those upon whose decisions our destiny rests. Otherwise, human civilization will be doomed. Well, thank you all for being here this afternoon.